Cool. All right, so we're live now, but we'll get started in a minute here. Give people some time to hop on.
Okay, and I'll share it from your page. Share. I guess I can share it into the groups also.
Oh, nice. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. We'll start in just a moment. I hope you're ready for this, everybody. I know Cameron and I are ready for this. There's a lot that we're going to cover, and it's really, the timing here is perfect.
Okay, I got it shared on my side.
All right, and then I have some stats as well that we're gonna be covering. I'm gonna just throw those in the comments so that whoever wants to fact check and do all that, here's everything we're covering, why it matters. Shout out to Jay Jesus for the music on this Easter weekend.
Yeah. Higher purpose, right?
Okay. And then I'll just guide the conversation. We won't worry about posting an agenda. We like to free flow, so. All right. With that being said, welcome everybody. Thanks for being on, Cameron. So this is one of our series of discussions that we've been having, and really the timing couldn't be more perfect for this. We're in the midst of coronavirus, and I just read in the news today that they predict that the peak of the outbreak is still further out. So as for society getting back up and running and whatever normal is and what the new normal is going to be, it's all up in the air. And it's really on each of us to take responsibility for what it is that we're going to create through this time and then after the pandemic slows down, if it ever does.
Yeah.
So with that, Cameron and I are going to be discussing many different points here, but I want to just start with some stats. Cameron has really opened my eyes to just how screwed up this world is. And me living in the United States, Cameron's in the United States too, we're both insulated from a lot of the suffering in the world, but also there's suffering right in our very cities that we live in.
Yeah.
And so here's just some stats so you can really understand the magnitude of what's going on here. And Cameron, if you have any points you want to discuss on any of these, like by all means jump in. I'm just going to share 3 right now, and all the resources are in the comments below if you want to investigate further. Okay, here's a sobering one. Every single day, 15,000 children and 800 women die, mostly from preventable causes. That's, if you were to do the math on how many that is per minute, that's disturbing.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if that's a really low number, you know, because I wonder what the criteria is for that, meaning because it says from mostly preventable causes. So I wonder what the preventable causes are, because how many things are there that we take for granted that are actually preventable, right? And I think that's really what we'll probably likely get into is this point about preventing, right? So that alone, I always come back to that because it's like how many children are dying every single day from stuff that could be prevented, and probably a lot more than that number, you know, probably a lot more than that, you know.
Yeah. And then so let's say then we do start implementing solutions to make these deaths go down. Well, that's a lot more people coming into a world right now of inequality with wealth and opportunity and being able to actually effectively navigate the world system to create a decent life for oneself. So the next point is Did you know that if you have an income over $32,400 per year, that puts you in the 1% of income earners in the world? So a lot of you watching this, we are the 1%.
Right. That's the sobering fact. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And if you're part of the 1% and you're spending your days playing video games or smoking weed or or
Or
um
pursuing happiness, as they say.
yeah, pursuing happiness, like you are equally as abusive as the most evil people in the world.
Yeah.
And this is going to take a lot of self-honesty to look at these points within yourself.
Yeah.
But that's what Cameron and I are here for, to help people walk through that and really look at the ugly stuff that we're accepting in our lives.
And I think that it's difficult for people to not just accept that point of what you just said, but even consider it. And like for example, on my personal Facebook, I post a lot of different things, and I don't necessarily post something because I 100% agree with it. And I'm like, I want you to agree with this information. It's more like I can take in a lot of different things and kind of look at it, and even if it like challenges something I think I know, but I can look at it and take from it what makes sense and then discard the stuff that doesn't make sense. And I think that this is an important quality because it's like, if for example you think that the world doesn't need to change at all, then you really have to give up any idea that you have a right to ever complain about any type of suffering ever that you ever experience yourself. Because it's like somebody could say like, oh, 15,000 children die a day. That's because of X, Y, and Z, and I can't do anything about that. The world is the way it is. It's like, okay, so you're telling me not to complain about this, that's something that I see as important. So then don't ever complain when somebody cuts you off in traffic. You know what I mean? But if a person's self-honest, they complain a lot in their head. Mostly what we do in our head is like just judging situations and like complaining, and that's pretty much most of what we do. 90% of what goes on in our conscious mind. So if there's someone watching who is like, there's like that point within you where you're like, okay, I may not agree with that statement that I'm responsible for any kind of like real suffering in this world, but I'm open to considering maybe there's something I'm not aware of, or something like that. Then really you should I would suggest to continue listening, or really evaluate what we're saying. The other thing is, we tend to take people, figures, and we create a character of them, like Bill Gates, for example, and they become like this really evil person. And then that person becomes the embodiment of everything we see as evil. And then within ourselves, we compare ourselves and we're like, well, wow, by comparison, I'm a good person. So I'm not responsible for anything bad. And so we have this whole dichotomy of good versus evil. So when you made that statement of, I'm paraphrasing you, but basically we're all equally responsible for all of the evil, nasty shit that happens in the world. It's like, oh, but I'm not doing all those things that person's doing. And it's like, no, you're probably not. And you may be a good person, but by being a good person, you're still accepting and allowing the systems that govern resource distribution and education and all number of things, every single thing that affects us as human beings. You're still allowing all those things to exist the way they do, which as a byproduct somewhere is producing a problem for somebody. And it's just not producing a massive problem for you. It does produce problems for you, but the more you either have a lot of money or you live in a first world country, the more, like you said earlier, the more you're insulated from that. But one thing that I find really fascinating, like in kind of, I guess it was probably like a few weeks ago or a month ago, I remember Madonna went viral because she did some tweet where she was like in her bathtub, and she was like talking about, and it was like this really weird shot of like her in the bathtub, like almost like, like when somebody's like depressed and they're in the bathtub or whatever. And she was like talking about, the coronavirus is the great equalizer, and it doesn't matter whether you're poor or you're rich, it's coming for everybody, right? And I mean, that's, we don't even need to go into, is the coronavirus real? Is it this? Is it that? Like, I don't know. I think it's a real virus that's affecting people. Is it overblown perhaps by the media to create fear and panic? Perhaps. But at the end of the day, regardless of what you believe it is, because you don't really know, is it having an effect on your life? You know what I mean? Like, an idea can have an effect on people's lives. It's not a real physical thing, but because people change their behavior accordingly, it's having an effect. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So like, regardless of what a person believes is the source of the pandemic, whatever it is, it's still shutting down economies and so forth. And so from that perspective, this is an equalizer, and for those who have studied Bernard, Pullman, and destiny, all those kind of things, we, meaning those of us who have been kind of studying this stuff and talking about it, have been saying this is going to happen for a long time. And, I don't remember what interview in particular it was, but there was one where Bernard, I remember him saying this point about, eventually the masses are going to be at the gates of the elite, like trying to get in, and we tend to project that as Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. But like you pointed out earlier, if you make more than $32,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of income globally, And so does it really insulate us? Clearly not, because look at what's going on right now with the whole economy. And even if you were invested in the stock market and you're making all kinds of money, right now you're probably panicking a little bit, and I'm sure there are some people who aren't because of the way that they're leveraged and so forth. But generally speaking, this is it's not really the virus itself. Again, whatever you believe is the origin or the source of the virus and pandemic, it's the nature of the systems that we've created. They're not resilient, and they're not designed to be best for everybody. And the problem is the internal mechanisms were never set up in a way that they were best for all. And so because of that, they're now starting to get to that point where they're fully, completely collapsing. And even the ones who thought that they were benefiting from it are no longer starting to benefit. And it's kind of like everyone's going a little bit haywire, trying to figure out what to do. Right. Mm-hmm. So that I guess my real point of that point I'm trying to make is, even if you feel like you're insulated and you feel like you're not responsible, it's going to affect you. So you need to become responsible. And I think probably that's what we'll get into, is like, mm-hmm. What is the future of, self-responsibility? Is it just take care of your family, or is it, take care of your family, take care of yourself, but also look at how what you participate in affects everything else in the world. And I'm sure you'll agree with me, the average person is incapable of doing that at the moment, because they cannot process information like that. And I'm not pretending that I'm at the point yet where I know everything. No, I'm not claiming that. But I'm at least at the point where when I look at everything that's going on, I understand that we're all collectively accepting and allowing a system that's not best for everybody. And the majority of the world is not even there yet, right? So we tend to then, in moments of fear, turn back to the governments, who of course are going to utilize that as an opportunity to get more power and control and so forth. And I was out walking this morning, and in preparation for us talking, I was kind of considering some points we could talk about, in addition to what you had there. And I was looking at it, I'm like, the average person cannot process information in a way that they can take the level of responsibility required at the moment for us all to be free, individual, totally self-governing individuals. Mm-hmm. Because it's like we can't be trusted, because our minds are so unstable, and we tend to place our own personal self-interest in terms of just immediate happiness or feeling. And it may not be like, and there are people who, even though they're self-interested, they're still able to apply delayed gratification. But the thing that they're delaying gratification for is still a point of self-interest, if that makes sense. So it's not always about its immediate self-interest, but it's always about in some form of like fear of loss or fear of death, or trying to protect something, or only protecting a certain group of people or something like that. So we, at the moment, you see all this stuff, articles. I've been posting a lot of things talking about how, there's more tracking, more surveillance, more all these things coming now because of what's going on. And this is a great excuse, this pandemic, for all these things to be implemented. But the average person is not at a point of information processing ability and self honesty to be able to participate in a system that is actually best for all. And so we're now at a point where it's like the government's, what choice do they have? And there's a lot of information we don't know. So for example, you could say, well, every person should have total free will. Okay, so you just want anybody who is a child molester to be able to just go and be around your kids anytime they want to. I mean, you would agree there's got to be some kind of limit. And would you have a problem with people who are like that being tracked and make sure that they're not around kids? So there has to be some common sense within it. The problem is, it's like right now there's this dichotomy between common sense versus just total, like, it's got to be like all in. It's got to be either we just let the government have total control and track us, or we simply just say it has to be a free for all. You know what I'm saying? And there can be a level of, we can utilize technology to be responsible and to track data and information, but at the same time, the self responsibility has to be there. So you can't just blame the governments. You can't just blame the Bill Gates and the Jeff Bezos and all that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we got some comments here that I just want to hit right before we go into the last stat and then jump in. So Jared Moore says, he said a few things here. I want to make sure I get his first comment. Well, he said one cannot be responsible for everything in the world, though. He says a government is just a collection of other humans that provide connection. A government is just a collection of other humans that provide services in return for rules of a society. And then he says self-honesty ? Like maybe he doesn't know exactly what we're referring to within self-honesty. We'll get into this, Jared, of what the self-responsibility actually looks like, and self-honesty as well. That's going to come up throughout this. So just stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot of good stuff here. I want to just say this last stat, and then we'll really jump into like the whole crux of this conversation. And this really highlights what you're just saying. Is so 32 million adults in America are functionally illiterate. So that in itself is very concerning. That's 14% of our population, 12 or 14% of our population right there, that can't even read functionally.
And what's fascinating is I like that the functional part, because those are people who you think can read, but they're not able to do anything with it.
Yeah.
Because people hear that and they're like, what was the number? 32%, right?
Yeah. No, it's 32 million.
32 million, right? 32 million, right? So that's like 10% about of our population, right? And it's like, what? But that's like, they seem like they can read. But this is also, and we've talked about this, you and I, in the Red Pill of Education, and what was the other one? Why Kids Can't Read. Those two chats that we did. We talked about the underlying points behind that. But when people hear that, I can see how a common reaction might be, that can't be real. That can't be true. You know what I mean? But again, it's not like they couldn't read the word cat and tell you what that word is. But when they read a book, they can't take that information and then go do something with it. Like if they read a book on investing or something, they just can't process it. They're just going to go get a job, go to work every day, but they can't apply any level of reading to actually do something functionally in society. And there's obviously a continuum of that. The functional illiteracy is like the most extreme form of that. But imagine the average person getting a book on, like I said, investing. They're not going to do anything with that. Mm-hmm. They're just going to end up trying to go to some authority who tells them like what they should do or whatever, right? So the literacy point is massive.
Yeah, and Jared said that he says, yes, 10% and I believe 40% of all adults worldwide are illiterate. Yeah, I don't know exactly the stats on worldwide, but I know it's high. And so that's a massive issue that we actually have solutions for, and we'll get into that too. So now to really jump into the conversation. So we call this the big picture. And in order to see the big picture of what this actually looks like in the world, first, we got to look within ourselves, because that's the real foundation by which we see everything else in the world. So here's one thing I was reflecting on this morning. I just want to run you through this analogy, everyone. Okay, you all have a crystal ball, right? You got a crystal ball, and you can see into the future and what your life holds for you and for your destiny, or whatever you want to call it, right? What is the actual crystal ball that you can see? That is two things. Look in your life, honestly. Where have you spent your time and your money over the past few weeks and months? Because that's a pretty accurate indicator of where you're going to be going in the future, is your track record of what you've already done. Look at it honestly. Don't bullshit yourself, but really look at it and then say, okay, as someone who's participating in the things I'm participating in, investing my time, energy, resources, money in the things I'm doing, is that the kind of person that's really going to be able to step up and do anything about this current world situation? Because if not, well, then you have no right to complain. And so really look at that for yourself, and remember that crystal ball analogy, because that's really going to be a gut check and a nice litmus test of what you have going on. And I had to get really honest with myself, and it sucked.
Yeah.
But that was the only time I could actually make change, and now be able to have these levels of conversation with Cameron and other people, where I don't have cognitive dissonance anymore, or at least to the extent I did. Because before I'd be like, well, I want to create a better world, but I'm just trying to get by, man, and trying to take a break and work for the weekend and that kind of thing. But now it's like, no, that's not going to cut it anymore. So
that's really cool. And I just wanted to add a comment on that. It's a ongoing thing, that point. Because there's layers to that point of self-honesty, of really. And really, self-honesty is just, how can I make it in a way where it's practical? If I were being honest with myself, that's how I look at it. It's like, if I were being honest with myself, versus if I'm in some way trying to lie to myself to cover something up, or to avoid having to change something or do something because I don't want to do it, or whatever it is. And it's hard. I know it's difficult. It's like Bernard Pullman said, self-honesty is the most difficult thing in the world, right? It's difficult, but at the same time, it's very simple. You could just be honest. And there's those moments, I know for myself, where it's like, okay, yeah, all right. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, now I'll be honest with myself. And sometimes it takes this point of experiencing a lot of pain and suffering, emotionally or physically or whatever, before you're willing to be self-honest. And it'd be nice if we can get through that very quickly, and then just get to the point where we're okay, let's just be honest and deal with reality here. And to that point of, you can't really take responsibility for everything. It for someone who would say that, and I understand where you're coming from, it just goes back to what you just said, Mitch, which is start with yourself first. Just look within yourself. Don't try to go into, how can I take responsibility for, a government in another country's response to a pandemic? It's not about that. It's about, look what I'm actually participating in, what I actually care about, what I think about, what I react to, all those little things just on a day-to-day basis. That's my level of responsibility in this world. So it's not about, how can I immediately take responsibility for something that I clearly cannot physically take responsibility for. It's what about the stuff that I'm focused on right now? Am I willing to dedicate myself to doing what's best for all, and stepping up and taking more and more responsibility, and letting go some of the driving forces within me that keep me distracted and entertained by stuff that's totally irrelevant? And I have to constantly check myself on those points too, because it's easy to fall into those points if we're not constantly, checking ourselves and so forth, right? So it's not in any way to create comparisons and so forth, or judgments of people. It's just, really, I know I can't make a difference in this world fundamentally if I'm the only one.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am not going to use that as an excuse to not do it. You know what I mean? It's like, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. But part of the doing it is supporting other people to wake up and be like, oh, I have to do it too. So until enough people wake up and we get into points where we can actually affect physical systems and governments and things like that, the goal is just to gather enough people to really understand what we're talking about, and how things can really change from the level of individual self-responsibility. We're not saying let's go protest in front of the parliament or the government buildings and demand change. That's not going to happen. Like, think about it. If Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell want to affect our lives, what do? Do they go to protest? Or no, they just go to work and they write laws. Mm-hmm. So take a cue from the ones who are actually making the rules, what they do. That's what we need to do. So we need to use the rules of the system, which is politics, voting, laws, things like that, but rewrite the rules so that everybody wins. Right? That's really, at the end of the day, what we're talking about. Now, someone might say, but like, there's no way I as an individual can do that. It's like, see, that's where the self-dishonesty comes in. Mm-hmm. And we place other people as like, again, like characters in like some idea we have, some picture of reality where we're like just ourselves, and there's like these other characters who are like the politicians and the movie stars and all these other people. Not realizing that that is the basis within ourselves, that acceptance of inequality in this world. We are saying we're not equal to those people. But in fact, we are equal. We all have to go to the toilet every day. We all have the same physical needs and so forth. The only major difference is vocabulary, like the way we understand and process information. Maybe you wouldn't be able to stand in Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell's shoes and do what they do, right? But then that would be part of the personal, individual challenge of developing yourself to a point where you can take more responsibility. So you just get rid of any excuse that you could have, right?
Yeah, and I really see right now, Guion Roberts made this awesome video yesterday or 2 days ago on a big insight through the whole Corona quarantine of we have been given an opportunity to really get clear on who it is we need to be from here and moving forward. So whether it's during the quarantine itself, what are you going to level up on? What are you going to learn? Like, who do you need to become so that as soon as those laws lift and the ban is over, how do you then show up? Because right now, I bet a lot of people, myself included, have regret. It's like, damn, I should have done that sooner. Oh, why did I not just like double down on that aspect and building community or something like that? So this is now bringing our conversation from personal responsibility, making it practical, to now looking at what does the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months look like, where now you start stepping up a little more, then a little more and a little more, or you just jump up, whatever in your self-honesty you're capable of. But that's really what I want everyone who's watching this to really reflect on. That's why we're doing this video, is for you to look at your life and understand, where can I step up and where have I been making excuses? Because if you're lucky enough to have internet and the ability to have 2 hours to watch this conversation, you have a amazing opportunity, and I say you have a responsibility to actually step up and begin to create real practical living solutions in your life and in the lives of others.
Look at those stats, for example, you were talking about, right? So 15,000 children die every day of preventable causes, let's just say, okay? And, if we had time, we could break it down into why all of that occurs. Let's just say because, exchange rates and interest rates and all kinds of things make, currencies devalued. And so resources are extracted and people aren't compensated. There's a whole system there, right? But those of us who like think about it like this. There's people right now who, generally speaking, their lives, because of this pandemic, they got worse, but they were already a living hell.
Yeah.
So now, for the first time perhaps in modern history, the 1%, remember, which is those people who are making more than $32,000 a year, are like, oh fuck. This is what it's like if the government tells me what I can and can't do. Because what you can and can't do is like, if you don't have money. So imagine a person who has no money. They're being told what they can and can't do because they don't have any money. So experiencing that collectively now in the first world. Now, think of this, like if your response to this is, oh man, I can't wait for just this to go away and things to go back to normal. If that is internally how we feel about it and we accept that, do we deserve to really be a part of this world? You see what I mean? It's like we're just saying, okay, yeah, I can see how the system fucked me over, but I just want to go back to normal for me. It's like this whole time when things seem to be going just fine, most people in the world were getting fucked over.
Mm-hmm.
And just now we're experiencing in the first world, like, oh shit, like, whoa, this is what it's like to live in a country where the government doesn't function or there's no jobs or, whatever it is specifically for that person, right? And so, I was really looking at that for myself of like, if I don't step up more now, then it's like, like we take life for granted.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm going to live till I'm 80 or 90 or 100 or whatever it is. Like, you don't know that. You don't know if you're not going to live till tomorrow. You don't know if you're going to get coronavirus and die, whatever it is. You don't know. And so are we just here to take advantage of a system that seems to benefit us? And we only want it to go back to the point where we're okay? Or are we like, no, yes, I want to be okay. I don't have some kind of suicide fantasies or something. You know what I mean? Like I want to live. I want my kids and my family to be okay. No one's suggesting, okay, now let's make everyone destitute. That doesn't make any sense, right? That's not what anyone, you or I, is suggesting. And I think that's a big fear when people talk about like communism or socialism, which is, well, so you just want to bring everybody down to an equally shitty life. Well, yeah, I don't want that. That sounds really stupid, right? This is about how can we raise ourselves to a point where we can take responsibility enough that a system can come forth that makes sure everybody has a baseline of rights to that which gives you a life of basic dignity. Now, from there, we can get really creative and create all kinds of things to take us even further. But right now, we don't even have a system in this world or in any country where everybody, has their basic needs met, right? And I'm not just talking about like basic income and that kind of stuff, because those are all like, not that there's anything wrong with some of those things, but they're all sort of still within the current system, because when somebody goes, well, where would you get the money for a basic income? It's like, well, fuck, I mean, they just printed $2 trillion or whatever it was out of thin air, and then they have all these things, they buying assets and all this stuff, but where'd the money come from? So now you can have these arguments about inflation and all kinds of stuff, but what my whole point is that's still within the context of, well, money is printed, but then it has to, it has to buy assets, or so. It can't just be based on the value of, hey, we're directing resources to where people need it, so everyone has an effective, like, basic life of dignity first. Let's make that a goal, and that doesn't mean we all have to starve in the first world in the meantime. But I mean, what is this all showing us? Maybe we do. Maybe people do need to experience like a little shock before they're like, okay, wait, maybe I need to, kind of. And I mean, I had that moment, like when I was in South Africa. I had these moments many times in my life, but there was a specific moment, like I talked about with you before, about when I was on this land, what do you call it? I guess you call it landfill. Like people go and dump their garbage and stuff, this massive landfill in South Africa. And there were children living on top of the landfill, and you see that and you're like, okay, fuck, like that's not something anybody would find acceptable, And so we have people who they will fight, and they'll make adjustments in their lives when it suits their own personal self-interest, but not when it's about everyone else. But the thing we have to realize is that what we're all experiencing right now is a consequence of all of us putting our self-interest first.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's not about we need to sacrifice ourselves for other people. There's no system in place that's like, okay, coronavirus, okay, everybody stay home for a bit. Let's assume it's totally a thing where it's a real virus. It's very deadly. We don't want to go out and spread it around. Let's just assume that is real. Okay, let's all stay home. Where are we going to get money? Where are we going to get food? Why don't we have systems in place? I mean, just a few days ago or a few months ago, whatever, I could literally order some random fucking toy on the internet and it would be at my doorstep in a day. You know what I mean? And how was that necessary?
Yeah.
Now people, like, we can't even get flour. We could barely get flour to make bread, because Katie's like making bread in the oven and stuff like that, right? You can barely get flour, and she was looking at electric mills for grinding your own flour. They're all sold out. Like the only one she could find was like $300, and she was like, well, am I going to grind my own? She's like trying to figure out the practicality of it. Is it something she's going to do long term or whatever, And my point is, like, I think most people 3 months ago, when I say most people, I mean in the first world, would think, dude, we have this amazing technology. You can get anything you want anytime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what are most young people doing with that? Okay. And no offense to anybody. Okay. Because I understand we're all focused on we have to survive and make money in the system. And I get that. But everybody's focused on how can I use that to become wealthy for myself, but not considering, okay, but am I actually taking advantage of something here? Am I in a position where I'm taking advantage? And so you're one of those people, which is very unique, where, at least in terms of my experience so far, hopefully it's not unique moving forward, where you're like, okay, I want to become wealthy, I want to do those things, but I realize I have a higher responsibility to it. And even if I got super wealthy and then I'm going to make a difference, that doesn't make sense. I need to make a difference at the same time,
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with people where they say that, they say the opposite of that, where they're like, well, when I become a billionaire, then I can make a difference. That's where self-honesty has to come in. Yeah. Where it's like, yes, I know I'm a very talented, intelligent person, and there's a lot of things I could do, but I want to do something that really matters. I don't know where that comes from within me. I just want to do something that really makes a difference. Does that make me a better person? No, that's just within me a driving point. And I don't know, because I'm not other people, but I think that because I haven't always felt that way, really. In the past, I wanted to make a difference because I wanted recognition. I would say it was, I want to make a difference, but really I just want to be famous. I just wanted to be recognized. I wanted to be like considered a genius or something like that. It wasn't really about making a difference.
That's self-honesty right there too.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, making a difference, most people think like, oh, Apple makes a difference or Microsoft makes a difference. Like, it does make a difference, but not fundamentally. You see the difference? You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like when they make a difference, we have to recontextualize that as like, how can I leave a lasting impact that moves the world towards being best for everybody?
Yeah.
And I know someone's going to say, well, can't determine what's best for everybody and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but you sure as damn well know right now that being stuck at home isn't best for you, isn't it? So who is that best for? It's funny because people will say like, well, you can't determine what's best for somebody else. And then the whole argument about free will and free choice and personal opinion and preference comes in. Well, let me ask you a question. I'll just role play with you for a second, okay? Is it best for you to have clean drinking water? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anybody else that's not best for? Mm-mm. So just right there in that simple exercise, we were able to determine something that's best for everybody.
Yep.
Okay, now, so I would assume anybody who's being in any level self-honest would have given the same answers you did. Mm-hmm. But then if I told you, okay, but now prior to everyone feeling like something's wrong in the world, many people were going without clean drinking water. Did you give a fuck then? And the person would say, well, self-honestly, no, I didn't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there is something that was demonstrably happening that's not best for everybody that should be, and you weren't doing anything about it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole, like, if I were to go back in time, like over the past maybe 2 years, about 2 years ago, I'd be like, well, it isn't best that people are going without clean drinking water, but like, what can I do about it?
Right.
And now that's what's been so helpful to now be plugged into this network that we have within TT, Gin, all that stuff, of like really understanding there are practical solutions, and there are people that we know that we're 1 degree of separation or 2 degrees of separation away from that are actually working on these solutions. And that is, that's cool.
Yes. And can you conceive, and I just mean you as in a hypothetical person, can you conceive that it's possible to solve the problem? Okay, because if you can, well, then it would just be a matter of getting the right people to care about it to implement the point. Mm-hmm. So maybe your role personally isn't to solve that problem directly by you figuring it out. But by you participating in caring about what's best for all and talking about these things and making it okay for other people to talk about it, and then finding where your talents can be used. You see what I mean? Because maybe the person who could, or the group or whatever, or the groups of people who could really just easily solve this problem, maybe something within them is saying, well, most people don't care about this. It doesn't really matter. The system can't change. You know what I mean? Like they need to wake up, and you could be a part of a catalyst to making that happen. So it doesn't mean like every single person has to become like the level of Bill Gates, because a person like that only exists because we have a system of such inequality. Mm-hmm. But I think is right now both the need and the opportunity for people to be like that, to be like these major leaders who are more aligned with what's best for everybody, right? So you have to really check yourself, though. It's like, are we doing it individually because we want to be seen as something, or is it we're really willing to do the necessary work? And one of those videos that I sent you this morning that I texted you, I forget which one it was, but in there Bernard was saying like, if no one else is willing to do it, and I mentioned this earlier, you have to be willing to do it. So imagine someone saying, well, I don't know how I can solve the water problem. Okay, have you put any thought into it? Do you know what I mean? Like, have you put any thought into it? Have you even done any research on what is the problem? Why does it exist? Like, dig into it. Who's actually doing this research information? Is anyone, like, you see what I mean? So the moment that a person says, well, I can't do anything about it. Okay, well, if everybody in the world says the exact same thing, then what? And what if all it required was for you to realize like, oh, this is the point that's causing the problem. Let me talk to that person. I mean, just giving the hypothetical, but also maybe what you'll discover within that is, oh, the reason why that's not being taken care of, it's not a problem in itself to solve at the moment. It's a problem that exists in the context of other problems that are all existing in the context of nobody fundamentally is accepting and allowing even the possibility that we can have a world that's best for everybody. And dude, like, I'm sure, we went to different schools and so forth, but we had the same education. We went to American schools, right?
Yeah.
Didn't you learn, and I'm not saying you learned this in school necessarily, but in your head, at some point at least, wasn't there this point of utopia is not possible?
Yeah. That's nice, but this is the real world. Stop being so optimistic. Like
everybody has that. And that's because we were taught that. We were told that. We were given examples, movies, books, all these things. And every time it's a utopia, what is it really? It's some kind of authoritarian dictatorship. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a fucking utopia. It's like, I will not stop until it's actually best. So to be like, well, if you even entertained what's best for all, then you're just going to be like communist China. Like that's how far you went with the whole thought process. Like, no, go all the way with it. Really go all the way.
Yeah.
Right? And it's funny because most people who talk about authoritarian all this stuff, they haven't even read 1984. They haven't even actually read. There's another good one. I'll just show you real quick. I don't know if you've seen this before. I don't know if you've seen this book before.
No.
Yeah. It's a Russian dystopian novel.
Okay.
So everyone hears of like 1984 and Brave New World, but here's another one. It's called We. Right? Mm-hmm. And so just want to throw that out there. But my point is, like, who's actually read those books and really processed it?
Right. And so as someone who has read those books, clearly read a lot of books, and I know you're very tapped into a lot of different networks of people working on solutions, paint a picture of what that world looks like a bit more for people who are watching. I mean, from my perspective, best for all means basic needs are met. We use that like Amazon one-day delivery or whatever the hell it's become for quality food, drinking water, clothes, education, basic technology to educate a child, basic books to understand how to think about reality in the world, like, and ship that to everybody's home or residence. That's possible. That's not actually that hard. I mean, yes, you need to really level yourself up, and yes, it will take years, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not actually that hard to conceive of that and then get a like-minded group of people to work on solutions like that. That's my understanding of what best for all practically I can conceive of right now. What do you think?
Well, like I agree with you. I mean, I can't. I can imagine, but it's instead of me trying to figure out what exactly it will look like, because you'll agree with me, like we can't know for sure.
Mhm.
It's more about what would the principles be that would govern something like that. And so what you were talking about just like now is a principle, but that's something you can imagine. Like, well, we have already systems and supply chains and all this stuff where we could deliver goods to everybody.
Mhm.
Right. And it's funny because now all the governments are like, oh, we need to give everybody money to survive. Right. Of course, it's not going to be enough. It's going to be just a little bit. Right. Um, I think that we have to look at what is necessary for a human being's development. Okay, we know that you need proper nutrition. You know that you need clothing and communication, like internet, stuff like that. And so those are things that we should have at a basic minimum. Everyone has those things covered. And what else is the purpose of government? That should be the purpose of government, is to ensure that those things happen. Because right now, what is government being turned into? Let's try to control everybody to make sure what the same people stay in power or whatever the case may be. But the purpose of government should be more like an administrative function to make sure that there's a balance and a flow of everything going on. You see what I mean? Right. That everyone's getting what they need, and there should be real-time measurement of that, right? Yeah. And I know that the fear people are going to have is this will be abused. Well, it's already being abused. Do you know what I mean? Like in other words, if the fear is, well, if we let the government track people and all this stuff, it'll be abused. That's already going to happen. 100%, no doubt whatsoever, it's already going to happen. So instead of us focusing on what we don't want to happen, which is that fear point, let's look at, okay, knowing that this is inevitable, like we're going to be tracked in real time by satellites and fucking drones and AI and everything anyways.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's going to happen. So, okay, how can we realign things and create laws and so forth, or whatever we need to do so that those things are done in a way that's best for everybody. It's used to everyone's advantage and not abused. And who actually has access and ownership of that information and control over it and so forth. Right. And what are the standards that we put in terms of people being able to be in positions of responsibility in the government and so forth? You know, like why don't we have personality disorder tests and stuff for like people in government? I'm just giving an example, you know, like we should have higher standards for who's actually making these decisions and so forth. But at the end of the day, to a certain degree, it doesn't matter if two things don't happen. If we don't have more and more people becoming educated, fundamentally educated, meaning they can process information at a higher level. If anybody has any disagreement with my statement that people need a higher level of education, just go watch the other videos that Mitch and I did on the red pill of education and why kids can't read and why this matters.
Look on YouTube. If you don't know Cameron's YouTube channel, which it's on there, it's Cameron V. Cope. It's a YouTube channel. Watch it. It's under discussions of reality. I suggest watch that whole playlist because there's a lot in there.
Yeah. So my point is, some people will say, well, I mean, think about just the word education. People define it as school, or they define it as I just read a lot of books, or whatever it is. I just saw someone arguing on Facebook right before we got on this with Rebecca about that point, right? And they were like, education doesn't equal intelligence and all these like different things. And just because you read a lot of books doesn't mean you're educated and like all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, go watch that videos. Those are two videos that we were just talking about. That'll give my perspective, our perspective on what it means to really be educated. Okay. Like John Taylor Gatto said, the real purpose of education should be to support a person to develop real responsibility for their life. That's the point of it, right? Okay. So if it doesn't do that, then it's just bullshit. It's mistaking schooling or indoctrination for education. Mm-hmm. So people have to become more educated because, well, and I guess it kind of goes, it's hard to distinguish the 2 points I'm going to make from each other, but the other point is you need people of integrity running for politics. Mm-hmm. But that's difficult. Okay, I'm not saying, when I say but, I don't mean it as an excuse, like we shouldn't do this. However, I'm saying we also concurrently need the other point, which is the education point. You need these 2 points concurrently. You need people becoming educated, people becoming able to process information at a higher level, to discern, well, it really comes down to self-honesty, because when you react to information and you draw a conclusion because of a internal feeling, it's like, imagine you have a computer which is programmed, okay? But in the program, there's little switches that are deliberately put incorrectly, so that when you give this certain input, it gives you this other output. But the program is the computer's programmed specifically to give you that output based on this input, even though it's not the actual output that you should get based on the input. Okay, so when you are ineffectively educated, I'll just put it that way. When you are ineffectively educated, what happens is that fundamentally you take input in and you get the wrong output. So the wrong response, the wrong evaluation, the wrong assessment, the wrong decision based on it, the wrong conclusion. And it has a lot to do with emotional bias. Okay, so I don't know if we necessarily have to go into all that right now, because we talk a lot about that in those other two videos. But my point is, education is far more fundamental than just, I know a lot of information in some books, because those are just opinions of other people. Even these books on research, those are still based on assumptions and research methods and everything. So it doesn't really matter how many books you read per se, if the vocabulary with which you're processing that information is basically biased and tainted with a bunch of, I mean, just bias, emotional bias. Like, for example, if I say the word politics and someone's like, oh, politicians, liars, politics is just, corruption and all this stuff. Like, okay, well, then you're fucked. You're never going to change the world. Because politics is the way we affect society. Mm-hmm. And a perfect example of getting that word wrong is, remember Occupy Wall Street? Remember that bullshit, right? What happened with that? Right? And plus, that whole thing was funded by like super rich people, like what's that guy, George Soros, and all these people. It's like, it's a big scam, right? But the point is, it gets a lot of people who have the energy and the enthusiasm to do something, to get them to go and do something that doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Because remember, if you're not Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump or any people who are in those positions making the decisions, you're doing nothing. You're just complaining. Mm-hmm. So if you're on your Facebook and you're just talking about Bill Gates and you're just complaining about the vaccines or whatever the thing is, and that's all you're doing, guess what you're getting from that? It's like, might as well just go jerk off. That's what it is. Okay. So we have to, because think about it. You're getting these words and all these things and all this data, and you're getting emotions from it. It's no different than watching a movie. You see what I mean? It's no different than just entertaining yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't share information, that you shouldn't evaluate information. But the question is, what are you going to do with it? And so what happens is, we're educated in society, and how is in those videos we talked about, we're educated in a way where we get information and we literally either go into fear or total apathy and inaction. That is by design. So how is that used? Well, you look at politics today, and really politics is just influencing people's perceptions. That's all it is. It's just a matter of, if you can get people to feel a certain way about something, regardless of the reality of it, then you can influence them to vote in a certain way. And then that vote goes to putting a certain person in a position of authority, where now that person can basically make whatever decisions they want now. And they're not held accountable at all, except for the next election cycle. So we have this illusion that, but if they don't do the right thing, they'll get voted out. No, they won't. Look at these people who've been in office for like 30, 40 years. And they're totally ineffective, and nothing's ever changed fundamentally. But what are they really good at? They're really good at PR. You know what I mean? They're really good at persuasion and manipulation of information and so forth, right? And I mean, just go back and look at, for example, the whole thing with like remember Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court justice, and there was that whole thing about him raping women and all this kind of stuff and all that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If there was any validity to any of that stuff, imagine him showing up day after day working with his other Supreme Court justice colleagues. Do you know what I mean? Like, if any of them actually thought that guy's literally a rapist, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. like they wouldn't put up with it. They'd be like, I'm not working with this guy. Do you see what I mean? I'm just giving you an example. But the perceptions and everything was manipulated in such a way where it was like there was people who literally straight up believed this guy was like a full-on rapist. He was just out there raping women, and he was just an example of how you can just get away with anything if you're a powerful white man in this world. And then there's the other side who's just like, nah, dude, this guy's a Christian and he's the greatest person ever in the world or whatever. And I'm not saying it's about one or the other, but you see how through information they can manipulate people. And I mean, it was like he was this close to like not making it, not making that nomination. Mm-hmm. Right? If it had been in the past, he probably wouldn't have. If it had been like maybe Donald Trump wasn't in office, or it wasn't like a different climate in terms of a lot of other factors and so forth.
Yeah.
But the point is now, let's say you have it, you want to make a difference in this world. Okay. So you want to run for political office. Well, you have to know that if you're going to present something that challenges anything really, that you're not going to be like the full weight of the propaganda machines that exist in this world are not going to come right for you. I mean, I've experienced that directly myself. You know, even before I felt like I was even actually making any level of impact whatsoever on anyone's lives, there was like real propaganda machines like coming after me. It's like, wow, that's fascinating. I must be getting at something. There must be something, at least in terms of principle behind what I'm doing, that threatens something. Yeah. You know what I mean? So there's just, if we have a population that is totally susceptible to emotional manipulation, dude, what can change? Exactly. You see what I mean? And so alongside that, then you can't just go, well, we just need people to stop buying into bullshit. That's not going to happen. That's why when you look at TechnoTutor, that's the point of what we're doing. And this is from the very beginning, before we even started the company. These were the discussions of like, how can we support generations of children to become more effective, responsible voters? We're not telling them what to vote for. That's not what it's about. It's about becoming able to evaluate information. And then as people move into the politics point, start presenting ideas, they can be evaluated instead of just using, like we talk about, ad hominem attacks and like using, you know, imagery and words in a way where the person doesn't listen to that person. You see what I mean? And it's funny because I've seen many people who, for example, let's just use Donald Trump as an example, who were very much against him because they just listened to what the media said. But then when they actually went and started watching his speeches, because he was doing all these rallies and stuff when he was running for president, they were like, oh, wow, that's not what he said. You see what I mean? But many people are not able to do that. They're not able to let go of that emotional bias within them. And then that's where the shutting down, the cognitive dissonance come in. And that's where the self-honesty is required to be like, wait a second, there's some energy moving within me. So I'm no longer here evaluating the information with common sense. I'm running a program. I'm literally just a computer processing information, and I'm not even in control of what that output's going to be. Because you feel a certain way. So that
people really understand that? Wow.
But I mean, you know, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
If we're honest with ourselves, that's what's going on. Like, you can see it for yourself. You don't have to go and have a degree in psychology like you do. Because think about it, you studied psychology and they didn't tell you any of that.
No.
But if you go study like public relations or PR or whatever it is, or sociology, they'll tell you how to manipulate it. So they won't tell you how it really works unless you go into the areas where you're going to be in a position where they can kind of control what's done. And that's why, like, I have like the Edward Bernays books, you know, about propaganda and so forth. They've known this stuff for a long time. Right. And unfortunately, we have an education system that gives the illusion that we're educated, but it's like we're educated just enough to be able to receive the propaganda, to receive the brainwashing, receive the manipulation, the persuasion, whatever it is, but not enough to evaluate it critically with common sense.
So this is really, I've really been reflecting on this over the past few months. Talking with Asif in particular, and we were talking about how, like, we are Homo sapien right now. We have been for however many years. But this is what, honestly, the next evolution of humanity can be, but it is not guaranteed. And that's why we do these videos, and that's why we do what we do every single day, is because it's not guaranteed that we're going to actually evolve. And what this really looks like is us being a human that has an operating system that shifts from just self-interest alone to actually caring about what's best for all, and then really seeing ourselves as you call it absolute individuality. And I just finished your book, and if anyone is ready to read this book, reach out to me, and we can get you a copy. And it's really akin to the human body, right? If only the brain is getting resources and nutrients, what happens to the rest of the body, right? We need to have a system of blood and resource distribution and regulation that gives all the organs of the body, all parts of the body, the proper nutrients so that they can actually work together in harmony. That's what the future of the world looks like, and what I'm and you are.
And it should look like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the only problem is lack of imagination, but that's because our imaginations are programmed by our education.
Yeah.
And it's like, as you're saying that, I'm looking at this whole thing that's going on with this injection of money from the Federal Reserve and all this stuff they're just doing, mostly going to these big corporations. And I understand the argument, which is like, we got to bail them out because these big corporations that blah, 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 blah. I get it, because they have all the jobs and all this stuff. And I understand the arguments. But notice, like, is the government as interested in saving that company as it is even one person dying unnecessarily? Right?
Yeah. No,
I'm not saying it's because the government is evil. It's not like I think Trump or Hillary or whoever is a bad person or trying to kill people or anything like that. I'm just saying we don't place value on, it's like they're just statistics. Okay, 1,000 people died. Okay, that's just what happens. It's like, why isn't okay, I understand right now as the system is, that's the best they can do. But can we do better? Right?
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like, evolution is not going to be something that just happens on its own. It's going to be by the choices of individuals to actually step up and take more responsibility. And it's funny because when you watch like sci-fi, like Star Trek and all these things, a lot of them, like Star Trek is a perfect example. It's like a society where pretty much everybody is like got what they need and everything. You see what I mean? And I know there's obviously a lot of bullshit in there as well, right? But it's like when you see like these futuristic depictions, it's always like we've got everybody, like the technology is taking care of everybody and all this stuff, right? So we can imagine it. But we have to have people who have the will to actually stand up and do that and make sure that things are adjusted in a way where it's taking care of everybody equally.
Yeah.
And right now, the profit motive is the driving force behind how decisions are made. And it should be based on, firstly, does the outflow of these decisions make life improved in a balanced way for everybody? Not just in this one particular area, because like you're pointing out, just from a practical standpoint, it's like, well, we're going to just make sure the brain gets oxygen. I'm not saying take oxygen away from the brain, right? But what I am saying is, okay, do that, but also we need to look at the whole picture. It doesn't have to be black or white. It doesn't have to be, well, either we do that or we take care of this one, homeless guy on the street. No, it's the starting point of the system itself, right? And I mean, what is it that we think these big corporations are supposed to do? They're supposed to help everybody, right? We're just putting the responsibility onto them. But then saying at the same time, but even though the purpose of capitalism, the purpose of profit, and the purpose of competition is to provide more things to all of us at cheaper and so forth, right? That's the idea, right? Okay. But at the same time, I want your driving motivation to be to make as much money as possible. Like, okay, but that wasn't the point of what you said was going to be the outcome.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making it clear. The starting point
is say it again.
The starting point is the end point. Yeah. So the proponents of capital, and I'm not a proponent of socialism. I'm not saying it has to be a dichotomy. I'm just saying the ones who are like, just free market, just let it go, no regulation, it'll take care of itself, it'll produce the best world everywhere. Okay, but the argument for that is that it will produce a world that's really amazing and everybody will have everything they need with no cost. But but that's the outcome. But the starting point is, okay, CEOs, here's how you're going to do it. Just focus on making as much money for yourself as possible and for the people who own your company. Wouldn't you think, though, that if the companies cooperated, there would be even better outcomes? Do you ever see companies cooperate unless it's collectively, like you don't see Walmart and Amazon cooperate, do you? Now, there may be some cases where they do, but it's in a competitive advantage way. It's not in it makes it better for everybody. Mm-hmm. Versus, imagine if Walmart, like, why do you need more than one Amazon? Do you know what I mean? Like, do we need more than one Amazon? Or should it be a whole bunch of little ones that all connect together? Or should that whole thing be like a government resource? I don't know the particular answer to that. But regardless of it, the specific point is we have to look at what's the starting point of it. Is the starting point of it, okay, we're going to make sure that the metrics that we use is that everybody has what they need. Mm-hmm. Because that's the claim that the people who are super hardcore, pro-capitalism, that they would say is the outcome that capitalism is going to produce. But that's not the starting point.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so even within, like, if you go to the socialism debate, it's like we're going to produce this world that's best for everybody, but it still plays by the same rules as capitalism. So it's not really a real solution either. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm like saying, well, capitalism is bad and we need this over here. There's elements of these things that can be used. It's just the starting point is the point that needs to be questioned. That's the most important point. It's the starting point of what's governing the decisions that you make and why you do things the way you do and so forth. Yeah. That's what has to be evaluated. Same thing with education, same thing with parenting, same thing with relationships. It's usually less about the how than it is about the why, the starting point, at least initially. Yeah. Because if that's not clear, then the how is going to end up with a fucked up outcome. You see what I mean? Yeah. But if you take the same how and you change the starting point, then you can have a really cool outcome. And so, like, the competition is not good or bad. It's the starting point. Mm-hmm. See what I mean? Like I'm just giving you an example real quick. Imagine if athletes, like in the NBA or whatever sport you want to talk about, what if it wasn't about per se being the best team, being number one, defeating everybody per se? What if there was an element within that where it was also about, like, putting on a performance, and that was like the starting point of everybody within it? So they weren't only like, they were also like, I want to be the best I can be and like the best at my skill level. But it's like, imagine if you combined the best of theater, you know what I mean? Or like a play or a movie, or, something where it's like you're trying to entertain along with the competitive aspect. And I know there's elements of that in those things as well, but it's not done in a way where that's the starting point of it. The starting point of it is like, we're trying to make money through advertising, and the teams are trying to be number one, because that way they're going to get more advertising and they have more influence and so forth. But I'm just saying, the thing that people like about the sports in many cases is like how, like when you watch Michael Jordan or somebody, and you watch like how amazing they're almost like an artist, right? But that's more of like a rare byproduct of it.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm trying to say? Yeah. Versus so imagine, for example, if the economy itself, part of the starting point of it and the purpose of it was to create a world where everybody was like at their fullest potential. You see what I mean? Like having the best nutrition and having the best fitness and the best relationships and the best amount, ability to use their time and all these things. All the things that each of us secretly desire when we envy the billionaires, because we imagine they have all of that. But they got it through a competitive system where the rules of the game are only they can get it. You see what I mean? And it's like, we all want that. We simultaneously envy it and simultaneously demonize it at the same time. We blame them for all the problems in the world.
And then we
want to be like that.
What was that?
But we want to be like them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then people abdicate responsibility for saying, well, that'd be nice, but I'm gonna just
right. And then it's just like, well, I have no idea. That's only because of the lack of education.
Right. Exactly.
The lack of reading ability, information processing ability. It's like the apathy sets in.
Yeah. So we got a comment from Cody. He said, "I don't think the issue is finding a solution to the problem. The solutions already exist. The issue is getting enough people to care enough about it to make the changes necessary needed."
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And I would agree with that. Right. Meaning, this is what I'm trying to say is like the solutions, like you pointed out, Amazon, it can already deliver anything worldwide.
Mhm.
And I saw some articles, they're dumping milk. They're destroying crop, like supplies of things because of the demand within the supply chain and all this stuff, right? So why is it taking longer to get stuff? Why is it that they're destroying crops? Why, and we've already known they've had like warehouses full of things that they just sit there to create so that they don't create an artificial, oversupply of a product or something. This is something that's been going on for a long time.
Mhm.
So it's not like we can't do it. It's just the starting point. Like Cody said, it's about people caring. And that is my whole point is we
Yeah.
don't care until it affects us. And this is another point to consider too. Without going into any ideas or beliefs about what the cause of the pandemic is, whether it's actually a virus, whether it's something the government's making up, or whether it's a real thing, but it's not as bad as they say, it doesn't matter. But the willingness of people right now to stay at home because their grandmother might get sick, or it's like I'm doing something that's best for everybody, you know what I'm trying to say. The
Mhm.
willingness of that, suddenly everybody's like, oh, and not everybody, but clearly most people, right? Or there are also many people I'm sure who are afraid if they go to work, they're gonna, they open up their restaurant, they're gonna be fined or whatever the case may be, right?
Mhm.
But there's many people out there, I'm sure, who are like, we got to do this for the good of everybody. We got to stay home because otherwise people will get sick and die. But literally 2 months ago, they didn't think like that at all about,
Yeah.
because it wasn't affecting them. And I'm not judging anybody on an individual basis because I don't know. But I can see that tendency because I understand myself. I understand how my own mind works and what it presents as information and conclusions and so forth. It's like I'm a good person for going along with this, and I'm like, on the side of history, and I'm, we need to protect the weak and the people who are immune compromised and all that stuff. But what about all the people who were dying of starvation 2 months ago because of the very system that you were just participating in, without even giving it a second thought?
Mhm.
And isn't it weird how it's like very quickly that switch can be made? That's not self-directive.
Yeah.
That's being imposed. That's very dangerous because that's like the government can just start flipping on the switch and getting whatever people it wants them to do. And it's not just the government. I'm using that term very loosely. It's the media. It's a lot of other points that are happening. And I'm not saying it's being coordinated necessarily at some particular level. All of this is just a function of that individual starting point, which is that pursuit of self-interest, pursuit of happiness, and so forth, and not actually caring about what's actually best. And like, okay, this is very inconvenient right now for most people, this whole thing.
Yeah.
But
So
what happens when it is convenient to just go back to work? Are people going to care anymore? Or is it like, well, now I'm good, so it's fine?
yeah, so that's what I want, a real-time status check, because I really want to know where people are at. So for everyone watching, or even if you're watching the replay, put in the comments, do you actually care to make a real change? I realize it's going to be public, so everyone's got a public face, so they got to save and everything, but let's actually see some comments of what are people willing to change and really live by that? Because I really want to know what y'all actually think. And then I want to lead us into this one other really final point I want to make in this conversation, which is I've been really investigating what are the really high leverage points in our society that really make the system keep going the way that it is. And one thing that was fascinating was really getting clear on parenting and how how parents share information with their kids, especially in those first 7 years when that kid is wide open information, that's actually what repeats that's what allows for the massive like repetition of these of this whole self-interest mindset. And so I want to get your take on that, Cameron, of really what is the role of parenting in this? Because, and how this is practical to everyone watching this, whether you're a parent already, whether you're not a parent, if you want to be a parent one day, be honest with yourself. And then step up now, because that responsibility starts now. If you want to be a parent, even in 10, 15 years, I don't know how young people are watching this, but even in a few years, that responsibility starts now. And so, Cameron, what's your take on parenting within the whole mix of creating this world that's best for all? And especially, one other point I want to say is looking at the state of the world right now with all the uncertainty and with forces like automation and potential even more wealth inequality and all that coming in. This is not a pretty world to bring a child into. And if you're doing it just from self-interest, oh, well, I'm supposed to. My parents want me to have a kid, or my friends have kids, and I want to have a kid too. It's like, get really clear on that starting point, because you're bringing a life into this world. So, Cameron, I would love to hear your take on the whole parenting and how it fits in.
Well, yeah, the way we parent children is the foundation for our entire society. If you, for example, parent your child in a way where you're just telling them that they have to listen to you because you're the authority, what's going to happen when that child is an adult? Because you have to consider too that when your child is small, you're programming them, like you're setting, it's like everything is basically new. So when they're hearing something, it's like they're getting their first exposure to that. And it's like, first impressions are the most important ones, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same idea. So when you're telling your children over and over in the very beginning of their life, like, you need to listen to authority because I'm the authority, you have to listen to me. And I understand why parents do it. So we can go into that. And I think we've talked about this before, but the point is, when you're doing that, you're setting them up so they're just going to listen to authority later. But what is authority? Right? Because the way it's defined in our world is just somebody who appears to be an authority. Do you know what I mean? It's more like an image than it is a real thing. Like, you're not telling the child, listen to me because I am an authority on this particular point, and here's why. I actually understand what I'm talking about, and I can explain it to you, and I can help you understand it. That's what our starting point is, Katie and I, for our children, is that we explain as much as possible what we're saying and why we're saying it. So if I ever catch myself saying, hey, Max, can you do that? And then I can see there's a resistance to it. I'm like, can you do it? And I'm like, oh, do you understand why I'm asking you to do it? Do you understand why I'm suggesting that we do that? Because instead of just seeing the resistance and going like, oh, how dare he resist? You know what I mean? Instead of doing that, it's like, wait, he's not understanding, right? And I understand if a parent's like, well, if it's life or death, like if they're going to run out into the street, right? Obviously, if they're going to run out of the street, you go and you grab them, okay? Don't let them, hey, do you understand why I'm saying not to, like that's stupid, okay? But could you prevent that by talking to them a bunch, like going outside near the street where, you're kind of sitting with them and you're like, hey, look, that's the street. You see the cars driving by? You know what happens if that car were to hit us, right? It could impact our bodies. It could hurt us. It could damage us. It could even kill us. What does it mean for it to kill us? Like, explain all these terms. And you might say, oh, you can't explain all that to a child. This is a huge myth. Then when does a child learn it? Like, if it's not possible to explain things to a child, at what point did they start to understand it? I don't know if that's making that clear. People think that you can't explain something to a child because the child can't understand you, okay? But where do they get the information at some point to then understand that explanation at some point later? Mm-hmm. Is they're getting it through your explanations. And so if you're not explaining stuff and you're using words like authority, the explanation of that word that they're getting is, just listen to somebody who's bigger than me, who seems more powerful than me. I should always follow their instructions. That's what they're getting from the context of your conversation. Instead of them getting that word along with you explaining what you're doing and why, and they're getting all of that. So those words are getting in there. And I understand a parent can feel like, well, shit, that's a lot to try to sit down and explain. Well, that's why we have technotutors, so you can actually go systematically and develop your child's vocabulary so they can comprehend you much more quickly and at a much younger age than you would otherwise think possible, because you're making sure that they're developing those building blocks of understanding, which are the words themselves. That's why my children have such a high level of understanding. That's why they cooperate. That's why they listen to me. We don't have like the big meltdowns and the blow-ups and stuff like that. And whenever we see signs of things like that, where they're crying or begging or whatever the case may be, which happens from time to time, we see it as, oh, something's not clicking, like something's not making sense. So instead of going at that indicator and punishing or trying to control, we look at how can we clarify more so that the behavior stops happening on it naturally, rather than it being suppressed. You see what I mean? So if someone's constantly like slapping your hand, really internally you're just getting really irritated and annoyed, or you're feeling like, God damn, like I can't ever do anything. You know what I mean? There's a lot of ways you could react to that internally. Versus if someone's explaining to you why you shouldn't be reaching for that thing, and you're like, oh, I understand why I'm going to choose not to do that, right? And I understand, again, the argument comes from a parent of like, well, but you can't just explain everything because they could end up running with scissors and stabbing themselves in the neck or whatever. It's like, well, put the scissors away. Take them down every once in a while and show them to them and let them cut stuff with it. And then tell them, I'm going to put them back up here because, you know, you could hurt yourself with them since you're not yet able to fully do it. And they're going to be like, well, I really want to play with them. Well, we're not going to play with them right now. Here's why. But let's do that again later. And, you know, like you introduce things into your environment, right? And I know a parent can feel like, man, that's a lot of work. That seems like impossible. But isn't that what you're assuming is happening at school? Like they're being explained how reality works? Like, or is it that a parent is saying, yeah, I know that's not happening, and I know my kid's not going to understand reality, and I'm okay with that. Like,
that's like literally child abuse.
Well, it is literally child abuse. It's like, I don't want to take full responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know, there's also something called self-abuse. Not taking full self-responsibility is abusing yourself. So this isn't just about you need to take responsibility and do more in the world because you're a piece of shit and you don't deserve to be here. No, it's you're here. This is your reality that you're in. You should want to improve your reality. Like, you're in this world. Wouldn't it have been nice to be born into a world where like literally everybody wakes up every day and like your breakfast is already available? You know what I mean? You have clothes, you have the best clothes, you have the best technology, everything's the best. And you're like, man, every single person you see on the street, like you could potentially sit down with that person for hours and just create the most amazing conversations and create some project and do stuff. Like at every turn is something like amazing opportunity for you to be creative and feel good. Like you feel so excited waking up every day because you're like, man, I'm so excited for what I'm going to do today. You know what I mean? Isn't that how, when you study like successful people, how they describe their life is?
Yeah.
Why should only they have it? And this is where I have the, this is where I see a problem with the people who kind of advocate for socialism and that kind of stuff, who are on the anti-capitalist side. Is they're like, there shouldn't be any billionaires, there shouldn't be any of this. We should have government should just provide everything to everybody, which I know can sound like what I'm talking about. But they're not looking at human potential really for what it really is. They're like still having an emotional reaction to something. They're still like, I don't like the billionaires. Those guys are assholes because of some programming they got when they were children. But they don't really have a full solution, because the solution is self-responsibility, which means becoming as educated as possible, which means the context of information processing ability, self-honesty, common sense, rationality, considering what's best for all rather than just self-interest or just self-sacrifice. Right? It doesn't have to be a dichotomy. In fact, if you're having to sacrifice yourself, that's not best for all because you're included in what's best for all. But if someone else is having to sacrifice, or you are allowing someone else to be sacrificed for your own self-interest, that's not best for all. And this can happen, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, in very subtle ways. I mean, the fact that, for example, 2 days ago or 2 months ago, or whatever, I could have anything I want delivered to my house within a day, and that I could just use that and have no problem with it and just be okay with it and going about my life. But somebody else was suffering because they weren't able to get like food that day. So, am I saying you should just give up your food? That would be self-sacrifice. But maybe we need to adjust the system a little bit to make sure that that person's able to get food every day before I worry about getting my, random little object from Amazon and that being the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Because somebody would be like, wow, I can get something from Amazon next day delivery. Okay, what's the next amazing thing I can get in my life? Rather than, hey, there are people out there right now that literally can't even get food. And I'm all excited because I was able to get this thing next day from Amazon. Like, you see the problem of like priorities.
Yeah.
So, going back to what Cody said, yeah, the solutions are already there. I really doubt there's very much that we would need to invent or create in terms of technology, I would assume. Although there may be like logistics and things that need to be considered, it's just more about the desire or the willingness to really make that a focus, and I agree with what you said in the beginning, which is like, this is a real time to reflect right now, like what you were saying, what Gian said, of like, what's my starting point of my life, and is it possible to continue working the job you have, if you have a job right now, and talk about these ideas and support these ideas? Absolutely. It's not about suddenly you got to just like sever all ties that you had to any of your life and suddenly try to like just start talking about doing what's best for all. Like, that's not practical. It's a process anyways, because we really have to start, or for those of us who haven't started, where you have to start or continue within and be diligent within is within yourself primarily, because that's where these little points of apathy or not caring come in, because we can't at all times see all of reality. So it's very easy to go into a little bubble of just your own personal self-interest. So you have to really be challenging these points. And that's why we have the tools of not just TechnoTutor, but for example, Destiny iProcess, DIP, and there is a free version as well, the Light course. I know you've talked about this. You have a great video on what you've gotten out of it so far. But those are the tools combined together, especially of interchange, to support you to even just be able to be comfortable functioning in a world where everyone has what they need, even to be able to accept that as a possibility, to accept it as, because there's all these little things, and it comes from our parenting, to go back to your question, the way we were parented, the examples we've seen, also, the things we've watched and all this stuff. There's all these little points within us of jealousy and envy and spitefulness and all these little things that we don't even realize are there necessarily, but they come out in moments. And those are the things we really have to work on within ourselves. So that would be my first point of primary focus, to start with that point. If you're like, how can I possibly make a difference in this world? First of all, if you could, would you? Would you want to? Would you want to start that? Okay. If yes, well, then now we can support you with, okay, well, I suggest start here. Because that's exactly what you did. I know, a year ago, whatever, you and I would have conversations about, well, what would it look like in the future and all this stuff. It's like, okay, let's start here. Let's start with looking at yourself. And you are a great example of taking those points on and really being self-honest within yourself. And then when you see the point, okay, I'm done with that. Next point, take on the next point. Like, I'm done with that point, and we all go through cycles. We all go through points where we fall and, we think that we've gotten rid of some pattern or some belief or idea or whatever that's not best within us. And then it comes back in a different form. And, oh, okay, wow, I didn't realize that was there. And I have to be honest with myself. And we have to let go of that regret or that feeling of disappointment or whatever image we've built up of ourselves of being really amazing. Because all of that is all just a part of the whole fucking illusion as well. That's what we call the revenge of the ego, right? So these are all little points that we have to challenge. So when it comes to the parenting point, none of these things that we're talking about, you and I here, are ever to be taken in isolation or out of context. Everything is within the same context. So parenting, education, those two go hand in hand. You can't give your child an effective education and be a terrible parent. Because whoever you are and your level of information processing ability, but also who you are, like your own inner spitefulness, envy, all those types of things, whatever it is, competitiveness, abusiveness, whatever, will become apparent in your children later on. because they're absorbing all of that from you in real time in the first 7 years of their life, and even in the womb and even before that, because you're passing on genetic information to them when you're conceiving them. There's information that's in your body and you're giving that information to them. So for those of you who are not parents, really start walking this process before you ever have kids. 7 years before you have kids, if possible, right? That's what I would suggest. Don't have kids for 7 years at least, if you can. Now, for some of you, things are going to happen. You're going to have kids. Maybe it wasn't planned, or you're going to want to have a kid anyways, and you're going to have a kid, or maybe they're on the way. You don't need to go into, just start now. Okay? Because maybe you can accelerate the point if you really apply yourself. Mm-hmm. But every day that we spend in, well, there's nothing I can do, or whatever. Imagine at the end of the day, years from now, whatever, at the end of your life, maybe, other people are going to step up and they're going to start implementing these points and changing themselves and showing that it's possible. Eventually, you're going to come back to this point and be like, okay, I guess it is possible. That's what's going to happen. You can't live in eternity with the idea that I can't take full responsibility for everything in the universe. Unless you just want to accept right now that you're not eternal. But I mean, you're going to have to face that at some point, whether you realize it or not. So if there's any point where a person can hear what I'm saying, I'm not the source and the fountain of all truth and knowingness in the universe. I'm not trying to be that. I don't want to be that. I'm not interested in that. And I know you don't want that either. Mm-hmm. We're simply like, hey, the more people that we can get to take self-responsibility, and the way you do that is by using TechnoTutor and Destiny I process. Those 2 points are the key tools within that point. There's other points, like we talk about GIN. You mentioned it earlier, the Global Information Network. That's a network, right? And there's also information and education within that to support you with how do you focus in a way where you make money within the current system? Because everything that we talk about is within the system. Isn't that interesting? We're talking about within the system, but then becoming successful within that without compromising your principles, but doing it as a group to where we can then change the rules, but in the system. Mm-hmm. Because you and I both know you can go into Congress and rewrite the laws. Now you might say, well, that's never going to happen. You'd have to have total agreement in Congress. Well, then how many people are there in Congress? Or how many do you need for a majority? You know what I mean? And let's get that many people. Mm-hmm. Well, where are you going to get all the money for the campaigns and all that kind of stuff? Well, let's figure that out. Let's create businesses. Let's create political action committees and all the things that need to happen so that we can put those points in place. It's a finite number, whether it's money or people, because there's a finite amount of money and people right now that is calling the shots right now. So no one can ever misconstrue what I'm saying to be calling for some kind of revolution or take down the government or any kind of bullshit like that, because none of that stuff has ever worked or will ever work. The only way that we can move society forward into a way that's best for everybody is for more people to take more self-responsibility. Now, if for those people who are like, well, how are we going to get to that point if it requires everybody to take full self-responsibility and become perfectly educated? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need enough people to be in the positions where we can adjust the laws of the system and the rules so that, for example, you don't have children growing up with poor nutrition. Because that right there, if you have poor nutrition early in life, you're fucked. You're going to have permanent brain damage at some level. You're not going to be at your full potential because of that. Maybe some of it's reversible, and I'm sure much of it is not. Malnutrition is fucking terrible, right? Just one example. Psychological damage, like growing up poor, growing up in an abusive family. There's all kinds of stuff that are problematic, that are pressures that people participate in and feel because of where they're at in a system that doesn't provide to them what they need. So for those who are in a position where they can start to move into a position where they don't need to struggle with those things, we can adjust the system so that we alleviate that on a much bigger scale. So eventually now you have people at least getting the basics that they need, and then now they can start to move up too. And that's the real point of and I think I talked about this probably in some of the audios in that playlist that you mentioned. I'm sure I have. But that's the real point. It's not about you need to get all 100% everybody perfect before you change the system. What's the point of changing the system? You see what I mean? The changing in the system is enough people who can hear me and hear you and hear what we're saying and join together from the same principles and work together, and then take political actions that are legal within the rules of the system to change and adjust the rules in such a way that people can now be supported in a way where they can move up out of those points where they could literally never have enough time or emotional or mental space to even consider or talk about what we're talking about. They just need to entertain themselves because they're under so much stress, or they're just doing whatever they're doing. Do you see what I mean? So the parenting obviously is a big point of it, but it's not something to be taken in isolation, right?
Yeah. And so anyone who's watching, if you have any final questions or anything based on anything we've discussed, and one thing that I would really like your take on in the current time, Cameron, is specifically with TechnoTutor, within creating more ability to take responsibility in one's life. I've met a lot of people who are already fairly successful in the world system who still don't comprehend the point on TechnoTutor. And it's like a process, right? Because it took me time. I was skeptical at first, and then I was like, I don't need this. Like, I'm good. I already read a bunch. I already have a few businesses. Like, I'm good. And then at some point after I talked to enough people, I was finally like, oh my God, like I've been bullshitting myself. Like this is like, I got really honest with myself, and seeing how the education system did fail me. Like I was reading at the speed of a third grader.
Yeah.
I had so much cognitive dissonance though. So what do you say to someone who already has some worldly success, who still will benefit from something like TT? Like, how do you make that point to them?
I would say that your success is compared to others. So I know what success feels like in this current system. It's not bliss. It is it's not even close. And there's a lot of other things that come with that, because you can be very successful at making money, for example, but still have a lot of challenges within your relationships, or like your kids don't like you, and you'll have to be honest with yourself what those points are. You may not really have a great relationship with your spouse, for example, or you may have a lot of things like that drive you within being successful from your childhood that you may feel like are the things that you need to hold on to that have gotten you there. But those are the things that will prevent you from being able to stand and do what's best for everybody. So my suggestion would be, if you are relatively successful in terms of the eyes of the system, you haven't even yet scratched the surface as to what is possible in terms of really feeling true personal bliss within yourself and real true creativity. Because right now your creativity is limited by everybody else, right? And also it's limited by what happened in the first 7 years of your life. So there's a lot that you can use TechnoTutor to support you to remove that'll have an instant impact within your life. And if you're already successful in the system and then you combine TechnoTutor, I mean, you can go a lot further and you can do what's actually best. So it opens up the door to experiencing and requiring a lot more creativity. Because I think sometimes people, they make a lot of money, they become successful, whatever, and then it's kind of like, well, I see where this is going. You know what I mean? There's very few out there who are like really like Elon Musk, who are like, I want to like create all this stuff. You see what I mean? And even he has his own limitations, right? I mean, look, how many times has he been divorced, right? Just as an example, right? So my point is, if you're already feeling like I'm very successful, I don't really need something like that. What is it? Let me ask you this. And maybe if you don't, well, I don't want to scare anybody. What is it that you need to lose before you wake up? Because if you walk away from this video feeling like I'm good, then you've just now set yourself on a path to losing whatever that is. And so you now have a responsibility to yourself to say, okay, it's not about fear of loss, but I need to reevaluate why I'm here. And if I am successful, that means I've benefited from this system and having some kind of advantages. And because of those advantages, that's why I'm in the position I'm in. It's not just because I worked hard. Yes, hard work is required, but hard work is a part of any kind of creative endeavor. So you're going to be able to apply all of those things that have gotten you where you're at to making a real difference in this world. And imagine, as successful as you are, bringing everybody up to that same level. That's really what we're talking about. So that's going to require even more creativity. And I think that people might look at, for example, what you're talking about as, I don't really need techno tutor. I think they're just afraid of the challenge, because it's like they don't want to destabilize what they have. It's like even being successful in itself is like a sort of stability point, right? And I don't want to challenge that. And so you have to look at for yourself, is there a point within me where I don't want the system to change because now I'm not going to be in that position anymore? It's like, that's my point exactly. That is coming. That is inevitable. So we may as well do everything we can to ease the transition to a world where, do you want to live in a world where your children, your grandchildren, everything is tracked and controlled? You can't say anything you don't want to say, and literally you may think right now you're okay. You can say what you want, but you don't know tomorrow what's going to be the next word or phrase or concept that you're not allowed to say. Otherwise, you're locked down. You can't access your credit cards. You can't access your self-driving car or air travel or anything. You know what I mean? So just because you might be successful now doesn't mean in the future it's going to remain that way. Because if we're in a competitive system where it's winner take all, then it's going to naturally go to only one person on top. And if you're not that one person, you're fucked. That's the bottom line. So at the end of the day, do this for yourself. Don't just do it because you want to help other people. Do it for yourself because you realize this is your opportunity to really be as creative as you can possibly be. Because, like in everything that you and I've studied, Mitch, they say set the biggest goal for yourself, something that would take lifetimes to achieve, because that's where you're going to experience the most bliss. Well, what bigger challenge can you possibly set for yourself than creating a world that's literally best for everybody? That is not static either. That continuously evolves and gets better and improves. So we're not saying, oh, everything's perfect, and then we're just like sitting around like, well, now what do I do? Like, no, it would be constantly improving and evolving. And the fact that it's hard to even imagine that just shows how screwed up our imaginations are because of our education, our upbringing and everything, because we've grown up in the context of this world, which has impulsed us in every way to just accept things the way they are. There's so many, it's like, those banks or those museums where it's like all those like laser wires, Yeah. That's like your mind. It's like every little, you could like trip some little thing that's like, oh, but I can't change the world because of that, or because of that, or because of that. You have to, and like that's what the techno tutor and the DIP is about, is like dismantling all those little tripwires. So you can just like walk around like, okay, nothing's controlling my movement or what I do. I'm here and I'm doing what's best because it's my fucking choice, right? That's what it comes down to.
And the levels of bliss and joy that I felt, that it just result from me going through this process and applying myself to doing what is challenging, and it's fucking tough and scary sometimes. But the levels of joy and gratitude that I have is, I could barely put it into words because I know what I'm doing is right. And that is something that I desire for everybody.
And also, just to make another point, what is delayed gratification? Because if you're in this lifetime right now going, well, I'm here to experience bliss, you don't understand delayed gratification. Because what you don't realize is you're compromising on something. So you're getting your reward now. Huh?
You're compromising something, you said?
You're compromising on something. If you're saying, I'm here to experience the bliss that I can right now in this life, you're compromising on something. You're not experiencing delayed gratification. So in other words, like you said, it's not about my goal is to experience bliss. Those things will come. It's a result of what you're doing rather than you're pursuing. If you're pursuing it, most people who are like, I'm pursuing bliss are very unhappy, actually. That's why they have the crystals and the pink stuff and the chakras and the yoga pants and all this stuff, because they're trying to create an image for themselves to convince themselves that they're happy. They're not happy. Remember, like Kevin Trudeau says in the Your Wish is Your Command, like the people who are really happy, it seem like they're total assholes and stuff, but they enjoy being like that. They enjoy that persona or whatever it is. So if I seem very serious, don't mistake it for like, oh, I'm just trying, whatever. It's like, it's not about pursuing and feeling good and all these things that you hear. If you are trying to pursue those things, but you're not making sure everyone has it, that's a problem. Because you are not here disconnected from everybody else, and it's pretty fitting that tomorrow is Easter Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned we could talk about this before, but the point is, like, what was it that Jesus was saying? Give as you want to receive. But now that statement, depending on your level of ability to process information, your vocabulary, and your emotional bias towards certain words, can be taken a lot of different ways. But what would be the highest expression of give as you want to receive? It would be create a system that gives to each equally what you'd want to receive if you were in their shoes. Create that system, right? That's what it's about, giving consent to that. Now, do you think people back in Jesus's time could comprehend that? No, they didn't have technotutor, right? They didn't have the comprehension and education and like access to information and context and understanding, and because you can see the consequences of the money system without having to be poor. Isn't that cool? You can go online and look up and look on YouTube and look up people who were really in poverty and like this. I saw this video recently of this like 12-year-old girl who has to raise her baby sister because the mom like died or whatever the thing was, and she was like in Uganda or something like that, and it was just like, and there's like flies buzzing around their face while they're interviewing her. You don't have to experience it to see that it's there, that it's a possibility, that that's an example of what happens when we don't have a world that's best for all. And even if there's one person that has to experience that, would you switch places with them? Because if there is such a thing as karma, wouldn't that be the result of karma? Is that, okay, well, fuck, I mean, here you go, at some point. And, just because you believe nothing exists and there's no consequence doesn't make it so. Because if consequence didn't exist, you wouldn't exist. Because you're the consequence of your mom and dad having a great time one night. That's a real consequence. So consequence actually exists. It's not something you can escape. It's real. Just like right now, the governments are shutting down the economies. There's a real consequence for that. So how do we prevent those consequences is by, from my perspective, actually implementing what Jesus said. And, I was looking up, there's all these statements that they were posting them on Good Friday. And everyone really liked this one statement, I guess, where he says like, it is finished. Have you seen this?
Mm-mm.
Right?
There's
like these 7 statements, I guess, that Jesus, his last statements when he died or whatever. And one of them, that day he died or whatever. And that one of them was, it is finished. Right? And it's like, what is finished? So imagine Jesus did all this stuff, died, he had some mission, right? He accomplished his mission. And then here you are living your life, shopping on Amazon while people are dying of starvation and all this stuff. And you're like going to Sunday mass or whatever. And you're like, the mission is accomplished. Jesus's message is done. All I have to do is partake in it. And I'm shopping on my Amazon. And then suddenly this virus happens. And you're like, what the fuck? I can't get my toilet paper. This is an outrage. Oh, this is terrible. How can you? You didn't give a fuck last Easter Sunday. You said it was finished back then. And now suddenly you're complaining that something's wrong in your life. So it's not finished for you. It's not finished for us. Our purpose here is to do what's best for all, to create a system that gives as we want to receive. That's the kingdom of heaven, isn't it? Right? And what did Jesus say? You have to become like a child. Well, isn't it interesting? You need to go back and look at your vocabulary, your understanding of reality in every single minute detail, and reprocess that and remediate it and understand, like, why do I think things are the way they are? Why do I believe what I believe?
Yeah, why do I react this way when someone says that word?
Right? How am I controlled by information and so forth? Right? Because I think that if we want to actually implement Jesus's message, it's to create that system. Imagine Jesus coming back to earth and being like, all right, cool. We have a world where everybody literally loves their brother and their neighbor as themselves because they can trust each other, because there's no reason for anyone to steal anymore because everyone has what they need. And no one has any spitefulness or envy of another person, because if you see a skill that somebody has or something that they have, you have the actual ability and right and everything you need to create that for yourself. And there's nothing literally physically holding you back from it. And they're more than willing to share with you how they did it, because they have no reason to, they don't need to keep it a secret. Like, if you get it, they can't have it, because that's currently what we have. You see what I mean? So it's funny that the lifestyle that everybody wants is not possible for everybody right now, the way it is. So instead of justifying that, let's find the ways to actually create it for everybody, so that we can get on with actually having a really cool reality and being here together. So that's my perspective.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's a great place to end it for now. That is the big picture, and it really does start within. And for those of you who want to continue the conversation further, send me a message. Add Cameron on Facebook as well. Check out that playlist. And for those of you who are actually serious about changing this, humble yourself enough to realize that tools like TechnoTutor and DIP Lite are things that will support you no matter what level of success or not level of success you have. We will work with you through that process. So thank you, Cameron. This is really great. And I'm willing to go all out in creating this system. And
Cool, me too.
I know you are too. So.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Talk next
All right.
time.
Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.